Everyone has been fascinated by Tutankhamun's tomb for hundreds of years. He was known as the Boy King, but what if the truth behind his life is even more surprising than the riches he left behind? What effect did this young pharaoh's health have on his rule? Let's find out the shocking things that are written in his DNA. The first shocking discovery. The world was shocked when Tutankhamun's DNA was found. It revealed shocking facts about his family that no one had seen coming. Historians had argued for hundreds of years about who Tut's parents were. Was his father Akhenaten the aggressive leader who tried to change Egypt's religion, or was he someone else? Was his mother the famous Queen Nefertiti, who was very beautiful and had a lot of power? Or was there another woman who gave birth to the Boy King? The big step forward came when DNA tests proved that Akhenaten was, in fact, Tutankhamun's father. This solved one of Egypt's biggest riddles. This discovery made the family tree of one of the most famous pharaohs in history clear right away. Akhenaten was Tut's father. He went against Egypt's ancient polytheistic custom by encouraging worship of the sun god Aten. This solidified Tut's place in the Amarna dynasty. The truth about his mother, on the other hand, was even worse. DNA testing proved that Tut's mother was the younger lady, a mummy whose name had been a mystery for a long time. What the younger lady found wasn't just important because it revealed a woman from the royal family. It showed something much scarier. Akhenaten's sister she was, since she shared genes with Tut. This meant that Tut was the child of an adulterous relationship. Egyptian royalty did this all the time, even though it was upsetting. They did it to keep the royal family pure. This finding put a dark shadow over the Amarna dynasty and its most famous king for many people. Having sexual relations with other members of the royal family wasn't just a strange fact. It had big effects on Tut's health, his rule, and Egypt's future. The genetic tests revealed that both of Tut's parents had dangerous genetic changes that were passed on to him. Because of this, Tut had weak health, showing in his clubfoot, cleft mouth, and other physical issues that happened over and over again in his life. DNA testing, on the other hand, showed more than just who his parents were. The fact that it went straight from Tut to the Amarna kingdom proved that he was Akhenaten's son and the granddaughter of the famous Queen Nefertiti. These results made the family's difficult past clearer. Akhenaten's radical changes to religion made enemies, and it was hard for his leaders like Tut to bring order back to a country that had become chaotic. But the DNA problems caused by royal incest made things even worse in a political situation that was already tough. The DNA proof also showed that the royal family's desire to keep bloodlines pure didn't just hurt their leaders. It also played a role in the end of the dynasty. The royal family was physically and genetically weaker because they were inbred, which made it hard for them to have strong children. The Amarna dynasty would eventually fall, and Tutankhamun's rule would be cut short. His tomb and the wealth inside it would be the last great legacy he saw of a once powerful family. Finding out who Tut's parents were not only solved a historical puzzle, but it also gave us a glimpse into how the Egyptian royal family lived, what they believed about bloodlines, and how far they would go to protect what they saw as their divine right to rule. It also gave us a new way to look at Tut's own life, which was full of illness, weakness, and death at a young age. Once scientists knew more about Tut's family tree, they were able to make shocking discoveries about his health and how his genes caused him to die too soon. This new information changes how we think about the memory of one of Egypt's most famous kings. But first, let's look at what that means. Are you ready for the next shock? Tut's health problems were a lot more complicated than anyone thought. There is a story that hasn't been told yet that needs to be found. The fatal price of royal incest. Throughout history, royal families have gone to great lengths to keep their genes alive. Egypt's royal family was no different. The pharaohs married family members, sometimes even their brothers, to keep the divine purity of their lineage. The plan was easy to understand: protect the family from any outside influences. What the pharaohs didn't know, though, was that their children would die because of this practice of incest. The act of inbreeding doesn't just promise royal blood, it also guarantees genetic flaws. Over time, it became clear how dangerous this practice was, as generations of pharaohs passed on genetic flaws that were bad for people. Some of these flaws may have been hidden in the family tree, but they slowly showed up as major health issues. The physical damage that generations of incest had done to Tutankhamun's genes was clear when he was born. The bad effects of royal incest on Tut's health were clear. In Tut's foot, they found Kohler's disease, a rare bone disease that kills off parts of bones. He was in a lot of pain and couldn't walk at all because of this disease and his club foot. Because Tut's foot was misshapen, twisted, and hurt to move, it's likely that he had trouble with even the most basic jobs, let alone running a kingdom. It was a clear sign that the flaws in his genes came from his royal parents. These flaws would affect his health, his life, and even his death. It wasn't just his foot that was hurt. DNA tests showed that Tut was weak from a very young age. His bones were weak, and he had a lot of abnormalities that made his body weaker. These physical flaws didn't happen by accident. They were caused by generations of royal families marrying close relatives to keep their divine position. In this case, dangerous recessive genes were able to show up, which caused a lot of health problems that could not have been ignored. Tut was born with birth defects that affected more than just his looks. They also made it harder for him to be a good leader. His clubfoot would have caused him a lot of pain all the time, and it would have made it hard for him to do his physical tasks as a leader. A sad irony is that the king, who was meant to lead Egypt, the most powerful country in ancient times, was physically stifled by his family's desire to keep the royal line alive. Other problems with his body were found through DNA tests. His bones, especially those in his legs and feet, were hurt from having to deal with his illness all his life. Other pharaohs were known for being strong and good at war, but Tut's body was very different. His life wasn't full of victories or impressive building projects. Instead, it was a fight to stay alive. The secret cost of royal incest is shown by these physical problems. What was once seen as a way to protect the future king or queen's body is now slowly and cruelly breaking it down. This finding changes more than just the story of Tut's health. It also helps us understand how royal inbreeding affected the royal bloodline in a wider sense. The effects of these genetic flaws were not just seen in Tut. He raised his family in the same way of life, so they probably had the same problems, many of which were hidden from view. It cost a lot to keep the divine gene alive, and Tut's case was just one example of how dangerous it could be. But Tut's life was so sad for more reasons than just his health. Because of flaws in his genes, his rule would not last long. He would eventually die of health problems, ending his life and legacy. Even though his tomb was full of amazing riches, the boy king was not healthy or strong enough to live long enough to fully rule Egypt. Scientists keep looking into Tut's body and learning more about how dangerous it is to keep a family pure at all costs. And it becomes clearer as we learn more. The royal family's desire to keep their divine status may have been what brought them down in the end. Even though Tut's health problems became clearer, his rule wasn't over yet. His story was about to show even more shocking facts. We're now going to talk about the most shocking discovery so far: how Tut's poor health and his royal family's bad reputation caused him to die too soon, and how his DNA helps us understand his sad story. The malaria revelation. Tutankhamun's story was sad not only because of the cuts he had on his body, but also because of the enemy he didn't see that made him weak inside. Scientists and scholars have been trying to figure out what might have killed the young pharaoh for years. Was it an accident with the cart, a blow to the head, or something else? Plasmodium falciparum, the parasite that causes malaria, was found in his body through DNA testing. This was a shocking discovery, a dangerous parasite that may have been the last straw for his weak body. Malaria is an old sickness that has been bothering people for a very long time. When a mosquito bites you, this parasite gets into your system and attacks your red blood cells. This can cause fevers, chills, and even death. Tut's DNA showed signs of malaria, which changed our understanding of how weak he was and why he died so soon. Malaria made him weaker, so it was probably impossible for his body to fight off other infections and injuries. He died at the age of 19 from these problems. Tut wasn't just sick with different illnesses. The malaria bug made his health even worse. Not only did he already have Kohler's disease and a clubfoot, but malaria made his body's problems even worse. He had a parasite and genetic factors that made his immune system weak all the time. A healthy immune system should be able to fight off an infection, but Tut's body was already sick with other problems, so it didn't have a chance. He was already weak, but the malaria made him more vulnerable to infections that most people wouldn't have thought were a big deal. When malaria and his DNA flaws worked together, they did the most damage. His immune system was already weak, and the disease made it even weaker. His body was already dealing with a lot of other problems, but malaria was the last blow. Because of his genetic conditions, his body wasn't strong enough to heal from any kind of damage, let alone a serious illness like malaria. So, when he got hurt in the way that killed him, either from a fall or some other kind of trauma, his body wasn't strong enough to fight back. The malaria and other health problems Tut already had probably kept his body in a steady state of decline so it couldn't handle any more stress. Scientists now think that his weak body, which wasn't able to fight off the malaria and heal from his injuries, was a big reason why he died so soon. The exact cause of his death is still being discussed. The weak king, who was meant to bring stability to Egypt, instead died from the disease that was passed down through his genes. What this finding also shows is that malaria was one of the most dangerous things in ancient times, able to kill even the strongest people. Tut may not have died of the sickness alone, but it probably made his death happen faster. His immune system wasn't strong enough to protect him after the final damage because of the malaria. The process was slow and painful, so the young king had no time to heal or grow into the leader Egypt needed. How did this dangerous bug weaken Tut, though? It's clear that his body was already under a lot of stress from his illnesses, but malaria would have made it even more so. Malaria's fever and chills attack the body and drain important energy. His immune system would have been even weaker as the disease got worse, making him more likely to get even the smallest illnesses. Injuries don't heal as quickly in people who aren't healthy, which means Tut's injuries may have been much more dangerous than they would have been for someone who was healthy. Because the young king had so many genetic problems, it's easy to see how he would finally give up because of the parasite and his own physical weaknesses. Malaria made him weaker from the inside, and since his health was already weak, it was the last straw that killed him. Was Tut's death murder or a natural decline? It has been decades since the death of King Tutankhamun was finally solved. It is still one of Egypt's biggest mysteries. Was he the target of a plot in the palace or a political killing? Or did he die in a terrible accident, like a chariot crash that killed him? Different ideas have been put forward about how Tut died, ranging from a violent murder to an unfortunate accident. However, modern science has helped us get closer to the truth. A new story has come to light thanks to DNA tests, CT scans, and other forensic evidence. It shows that Tut's death wasn't caused by violence, but by his health getting worse over time. People were very interested in the murder idea for a long time. Some people thought it made sense that Tut had been killed. Egypt's government was uncertain during his rule because his father, Akhenaten, had caused changes in religion. Back when Tut was a young boy and became king, he was surrounded by powerful people who all had their own goals. Was he just a pawn in a game of palace politics, taken out of the way so that a stronger ruler could take over? This idea made sense, especially when you think about how young Tut was and how he might have been threatened by people in his own court. But DNA and other forensic data found in the last few years show a different picture. Tut's death wasn't caused by violence or foul play. Instead, it seems to have been a slow, painful decline caused by his poor health and the genetic diseases he inherited. Scientists used modern imaging techniques like CT scans to look at Tut's body and found more than just a strange death. They also found proof that his body had been poorly handled after death, which disproved the initial murder theories. The crack in the back of Tut's head was one of the most confusing pieces of evidence. Early X-rays and readings suggested that the young king may have died from a blow to the head, which led to the idea that he had been killed by a killer's weapon. With this, we had a big piece of the murder puzzle. But when scientists looked more closely, they found that the skull crack happened after the body was dead, most likely while the body was being embalmed. This was a very important discovery. Tut's head wasn't broken while he was alive, but when he was dead, when the embalmers were working on his body. The murder idea was thrown out by this discovery, which also gave us new information about how Tut's body had been treated after he died. The evidence we have now shows that Tut's last days were marked by a slow and painful decline, which was caused by genetic health problems, malaria, and an unfortunate injury. The young king's body was weak from birth because he had birth defects like a club foot and Kohler's disease. which made his bones break down quickly. Because of these health problems, he could have gotten infections or hurt himself. The malaria parasite that was found in his body made him even weaker, which made it harder for him to get better from any sickness or injury. The genetic defects, the malaria, and the damage to his leg all seem to have contributed to his death. His immune system was probably weakened by all of these problems, so he couldn't fight off the infections that killed him in the end. Tut's death did not happen by chance. It seems to have been the result of his health getting worse over time. When we look again at what killed Tut, we can see that the signs were there all along. With his weak health, genetic problems, and the crippling effects of malaria, it was like a perfect storm that killed him too soon. Not a single traumatic event, but a string of health problems that got worse over time, that ended a young life that had just started. This young king's story is much more complicated than just a murder mystery or a terrible accident. When we take a step back and think about how he really died, the evidence now points to a tragic decline, a buildup of genetics, illness, and accident that caused him to die too soon. Egypt was meant to be more stable under the young ruler, but instead he was stuck in a web of inherited diseases and illnesses, and his body couldn't handle the stress. It's not just how Tut died that is a secret. It's also how his life was shaped by the genetic flaws that would become his legacy. A king who was born into tragedy. DNA testing revealed the truth about King Tutankhamun's health, which has totally changed how people see this once iconic ruler. People thought of Tut as the young, brave hero of ancient Egypt for a long time. The beauty of his tomb and the wealth it held shaped this idea. But the results of modern science have broken that myth. Tut was not a strong and resilient king. Instead, he was a weak and sickly young man who had a history of genetic diseases and health problems in his family. Because of these DNA discoveries, Tut's rule looks a lot worse now. Instead of being a confident and successful pharaoh, he came from a royal line that had been tainted by sickness and inbreeding. Tut had a club foot and other bone problems that were found through DNA testing. These problems were probably caused by genetic disorders that were passed down through generations of incest in Egypt's royal family. In order to keep the royal bloodline pure, people often married close relations. This had unintended effects, and Tut's health problems were a direct result of these decisions. With this new knowledge, Tut's impact as a symbol of ancient Egypt has changed in a big way. What was once thought of as a strange, almost mythical figure is now seen as a sad one. Tut didn't die in a heroic fight or a big victory. Instead, he died at the end of a life full of illness and weakness that was caused by his bloodline, which was supposed to protect him. His once grand reputation is now shaped by the actions of his family that brought about his downfall. New information about the Amarna kingdom, to which Tut belonged, has also changed how we think about the whole time period. Tut's genetic profile helps explain why the dynasty fell apart by showing how the royal family's health got worse over time from mixing with each other. It's possible that other members of the Amarna dynasty had the same genetic problems that affected Tut. This adds to the tragedy of the family's fall. These findings change a lot about how we think about how the ancient Egyptian royal family lived and worked. The goal of inbreeding was to keep the bloodline pure, but it was terrible for the whole health of Egypt's kings. The Egyptians thought their kings were gods, but modern research shows that their ruling bloodline was just as weak as it was strong. Tutankhamun's story has been forever changed by science, revealing the truth behind his tragic life. Like, share, and subscribe for more incredible discoveries, and don't forget to click on the next video popping up on your screen.